Thank you very much, Stan. It's an enormous honor and privilege to be here in the presence of President Shimon Peres and such a remarkable group of people. And I'm glad to have this opportunity to talk about the U.S. economy. I hope you will forgive me if I seek to look beyond the questions of the business cycle over the next several years to consider the broader position of the United States. I had, as Stan said, the great privilege of serving as the Minister of Finance of the United States. And since that time, I have had the opportunity to travel widely. And I would just say that for all of our many problems, and I will talk about some of those, there is, I believe, no country in the world with better prospects, with more opportunities, or with a more globally important role than the United States of America. It is tempting to write the United States off, to suggest that it was the power of the 20th century and that the 21st century will belong to someone else. I would say this: when the world's financial markets were in distress, the assets that people rushed into were U.S. dollar assets in general and U.S. Treasury bonds in particular. When brilliant people around the world seek the best and most challenging education or the best place to find their fortune, they choose to come to the United States. When the world's attention was focused on a square in Cairo, and the question was what the global response would be, people did not look to Paris or Berlin or Beijing. They looked to Washington for that response. The United States remains in a central role in the global system. People ask whether that will continue. They have asked that question for the last half century. In 1960, John Kennedy ran for president believing that within a generation, the U.S. economy would be surpassed by the Russian economy. It was the conventional wisdom of the mid-1970s that the United States would not be able to make its way amidst an era of scarcity, amidst a loss of confidence caused by Watergate and Vietnam. The détente policy was crafted on the basis of an idea that the balance of forces in the Cold War had changed against the United States. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, people thought the text for the Times was a book called The Rise and Fall of Great Powers that focused on the United States' challenges. The Harvard Business Review proclaimed in every issue in 1991 that the Cold War was over and Germany and Japan had won. And yet the United States enjoyed an economic renaissance during the 1990s, and the 5-decade story of convergence gave way to a situation where the United States pulled away. And again today, there are doubts about budget deficits, about division in Washington, about strategic choices in the world, about the rise of China. And I would suggest to you that, as before, it is the resilience of the United States, its capacity to reinvent itself that is the United States' greatest strength. I don't minimize our current economic problems. But if you look at what was being faced in 2008 and 2009, and you look at what has happened since that time, make no mistake, this was the economic equivalent of the Cuban Missile Crisis. It could have been a catastrophe on an entirely different scale than it was. Within 12 months of those problems becoming critical, the United States had launched a major program of fiscal expansion. The United States had rescued its major automobile companies. The United States had intervened in its banking system and supported it to the point where credit spreads had narrowed. Contrast that record with the response to crises in other parts of the industrialized world if you doubt that the United States has a capacity to function effectively in this world. What of the prospects going forward? Growth has not been as rapid as was hoped. It has been somewhat slower, frankly, than I or many other observers would have expected 6 or 9 months ago. But let us keep perspective. After slowing down, it is growing faster than most of the rest of the industrialized world. Germany has still not yet seen GDP reach previous peak levels. That milestone was crossed some time ago in the United States. And there is a clear will to do what is necessary to push the economy forward. And so I would suggest that it's not likely that the next years are going to be the years of most rapid growth that we have seen. The overhang of excessive levels of capital, the overhang of excessive levels of debt make that unlikely. But I would suggest to you that when people look back and they take the really long view, what they are going to be struck by is that if one looks at a once every 50 years crisis, this one was contained. The ability of the United States to move forward was maintained, and the commitment of the United States to robust internationalism was left intact. And I would say a final thing, and that is that the United States makes many mistakes. There are tactical judgments that are made that obviously are open to challenge. No individual American will agree with all the judgments that his or her country makes. But if you look at a world in which there are profound changes in economic strength in Asia, if you look at a world in which the capacity to do great damage has been enormously democratized and exists on much smaller scales than ever before. If you look at a world where processes of integration are going to be need to be led and managed, that people everywhere on this planet have a stake in the success, the continuing success of the American project, a project that I believe will flourish and reach new heights in the generation ahead. Thank you.